You wake up in the middle of the night with your heart racing. The room is dark, but the silence brings no peace. It is a heavy silence, one that seems to crush the air itself. Beside you, someone breathes calmly, as if nothing had happened. But inside you, something screams. Why does love hurt so much? Your chest tightens as if you were fighting an invisible battle. There are no screams, no violence, yet there is an unsettling feeling, as if every gesture of affection carried a hidden price. The touch that should bring comfort seems to carry an invisible chain. Nietzsche would say that love is rarely innocent. Often, it is nothing more than the mask of something darker, the will to power. You believe you are in love, but in truth, you may be trapped in a silent game, where every word spoken and every gesture of affection hides the desire to dominate, to possess, to control. And here arises the question that will not let you sleep. Is love, inevitably, suffering? Or have you simply failed to notice that you are living on a battlefield disguised as romance? This is only the beginning of the descent into the depths Nietzsche invites us to face. Have you noticed how, in so many moments, love feels more like a silent struggle than a place of rest? Nietzsche believed that love is rarely just tenderness. For him, to love is also to desire, to possess, to impose yourself upon the other. When you say, "I love you," perhaps you are really saying, without realizing it, "I want you to be mine." Think of the times you felt jealousy, the heat in your stomach, the knot in your throat, the fear of losing what you consider part of yourself. That discomfort is clear proof that love, deep down, carries the urge to possess. You do not suffer only because you care about the person. You suffer because you believe they are yours, that they should revolve around you. Nietzsche saw in this impulse the mark of the will to power, the tendency we all have to expand our strength, to affirm our existence by dominating the space around us. In love, this force shows itself in gestures small and almost imperceptible, a glance that demands an answer, a reproach disguised as concern, a silence that weighs more than any word. Now imagine the other side. How many times have you felt suffocated by the desire of someone who claimed to love you? The affection came tied to conditions, expectations, demands. If you love me, do this. If you love me, don't do that. Little by little, you realize you are not being loved for who you are, but molded to fit into the image the other created. It is here that love ceases to be freedom and turns into a prison. You believe you are giving the best of yourself, but in truth, you are adapting, bending, erasing yourself. To love, in this sense, is like breathing in a closed room. You are alive, but you feel the air is missing. Nietzsche did not reject love. On the contrary, he saw it as a creative force, something that could propel life forward, but only when it is not poisoned by the obsession to control. The question that remains is, are you truly loving, or merely trying to bind the other in your invisible chains? And it is precisely here that the next doubt arises. If love is crossed by the will to power, how does it truly reveal itself in human relationships? Have you ever noticed how, in every relationship, there is an invisible thread pulling from one side and the other? Sometimes it feels so subtle that it looks like affection, but when you look closely, you discover it is a struggle. Nietzsche believed that this thread has a name, the will to power. The will to power is not just the desire to control others directly. It runs much deeper. It lives in the instinct of every human being to affirm their existence, to expand their strength, to impose their presence on the world. It is as if every encounter between two people were also a silent clash to decide who leads the dance. Think of a seemingly trivial argument. The raised tone of voice, the insistence on having the last word, the calculated pause meant to make the other feel insecure. None of this is random. These are expressions of power. Even silence can be wielded as a weapon, turning the atmosphere into a field of tension. In love, this struggle intensifies. You believe you are seeking harmony, but many times you are only trying to secure your position. You want to be heard, respected, desired. And all of this can easily turn into demands disguised as affection. On the other side, the other person is also trying to claim space, recognition, control. The result is a game of forces, sometimes so refined that neither notices it consciously, but both feel the weight. Nietzsche saw life itself as constant conflict. Love does not escape this law. Behind every gesture of care, there may be an attempt to impose direction. Behind every promise of forever, there may be a hidden contract of submission. Even sacrifice, when you give something up for someone, can carry a secret desire for power. See how I suffer for you. Now you owe me something. The question Nietzsche forces us to face is brutal. Does every love carry within it a disguise battle? When you swear you love, are you really only fighting for an invisible throne within the relationship? If that is true, the next step becomes inevitable. To understand how this impulse to use the other as mirror and shield turns love into a form of self-assertion. Have you ever noticed how, so often, when you say I love you, what you really mean is I love the way you make me feel? Nietzsche saw in love not only surrender, but also a mirror. You do not see only the other. You see yourself reflected in them. It is as if the person you love were a canvas, and upon it you painted the ideal image of who you long to be. This mechanism is dangerous because affection stops being a meeting of two worlds and becomes a form of self-assertion. You begin to measure your worth by the light you see in the other's eyes. If they admire you, you feel you exist. If they reject you, your identity dissolves like sand carried away by the wind. Love, at this point, stops being freedom and becomes dependence. Nietzsche said that the human being constantly seeks to affirm their strength. In love, this affirmation happens when you turn the other's presence into proof of your own worth. If he chose me, I deserve it. If she desires me, I matter. To love, in this way, is not simply to feel for the other, but to use the other as a seal of validation for your own existence. Now think of how many times you stayed in relationships that were already broken, not out of true love, but because leaving meant facing the emptiness. You feared seeing yourself without that reflection that confirmed your identity. Love became synonymous with not losing yourself, but only because you no longer knew who you were without that mirror. And that is where the pain begins. The more you depend on the other to see yourself, the more you lose yourself. The more you turn the relationship into a stage for your self-assertion, the more you turn love into a prison. A love you can, without you realizing it, mean, I need you in order to keep existing. Nietzsche warns us, when love becomes nothing more than a way to inflate the ego, it ceases to be an encounter and becomes a disguise. And in that disguise, suffering is not accidental, it is inevitable. But if suffering is part of love, could that suffering also be a path to growth? Or is it nothing more than a slow poison that destroys us? Have you ever felt that weight in your chest that appears precisely when you should be happy beside someone? Nietzsche believed that suffering is not an accident of love, but an inevitable part of it. To love is to expose yourself, to open the door of your vulnerability and allow the other to cross it. But every opening carries risk, the risk of being hurt. When you give yourself, you discover that you do not control the other's gaze, nor what they feel, nor the intensity of their affection. And that lack of control is already pain. It is like walking on a floor of glass. Every step can be beautiful, reflecting the light, but can also crack at any moment. Nietzsche saw in suffering the mark of authentic life. Whoever loves, suffers. Not because love is a mistake, but because being alive means throwing yourself into the unknown, without guarantees. Love only makes this truth clearer. Every embrace can be a promise, and also a threat. Every word of affection can turn into an icy silence the next day. This suffering, however, can take two faces. In one, it serves as fuel. It forces you to grow, to recognize your limits, to discover strengths you never knew you had. You learn to live with the fear of losing, to accept that nothing is eternal, to become stronger in the face of life's fragility. In this sense, Nietzsche saw pain as necessary, because it shapes, sharpens, awakens. On the other face, though, suffering can turn into poison. When you confuse pain with proof of love, you end up trapped in relationships that slowly destroy you. Every humiliation is interpreted as intensity. Every absence as a sign of secret passion. And so you grow accustomed to believing that to love is, by definition, to bleed. The question Nietzsche invites us to ask is brutal. Is the suffering you experience in the relationship strengthening your existence, or merely corroding your essence? Are you becoming freer, or more enslaved? And if suffering is inevitable, the next question arises. Is the true trap not the illusion we create of perfect love, the one that promises happiness without pain? Have you noticed how the world sells the idea that true love must be perfect, gentle, eternal? Movies, songs, childhood stories, all reinforce the fantasy of the soulmate, the encounter that fills every emptiness. Nietzsche saw this belief as a trap. For him, life is made of chaos, of pain, of contradictions, and love does not escape that. The promise of absolute peace and love is nothing but a comfortable illusion. When you believe in this fantasy, every imperfection in the relationship becomes a shock. The silence that should be only a pause feels like a sign of failure. The argument that could be just a difference of opinion becomes proof that love has ended. You compare your life to an ideal that never existed, and that comparison slowly poisons your experience. Nietzsche warned that to seek and love the salvation from pain is to deny the very nature of life. Love, like all that is alive, is unstable. It has nights of passion and mornings of distance, moments of complete surrender and hours of cold absence. Romantic illusion promises constancy, but reality always fluctuates. And here lies the danger. When you cling to this myth, you start tolerating distortions just to keep the fantasy alive. You endure lies because you believe that every love faces crises. You accept manipulations because you think that true love resists everything. You confuse endurance with prison and hope with self-deception. Nietzsche would remind us to face love for what it is. A creative force, but also a destructive one. A source of pleasure, but also of pain. Those who enter a relationship expecting only peace are shocked by the storm. Those who enter embracing the chaos learn to navigate, even when the raging sea threatens to drown them. The romantic illusion, then, is not harmless. It can become fertile ground for the most toxic relationships. Because when you believe that love means enduring everything, you open the doors for the will to power to manifest itself in its most brutal form. And it is precisely at this point that the dark revelation arises. Perhaps the most destructive relationships are not accidents, but perfect expressions of that very will to power. Have you ever asked yourself why some relationships seem to drain your energy, even when they begin full of promises? Nietzsche would say that, behind the word love, there often hides the rawest expression of the will to power. To love, in such cases, is not union, but domination. Not sharing, but a disguised contest. In these relationships, manipulation dresses itself as care. You hear phrases like, "I only want what's best for you," but you feel that every piece of advice comes loaded with demands. Affection becomes a bargaining chip. If you do what the other wants, you receive warmth. If not, you face the chill of indifference. Even silence is used as a weapon, an invisible punishment that forces you to give in. Nietzsche believed that every human being seeks to assert their strength. In toxic relationships, that instinct turns into a game. The one who manipulates believes they love, but what they love is only the control they wield. And the one being manipulated, afraid of losing, learns to confuse pain with proof of intensity. It is like drinking poison every day and calling it wine. Have you ever been in that place? Walking in circles, trying to please, believing that if you suffer just a little more, you will finally earn peace. This is the dark cycle of the will to power. One imposes, the other submits, and both call this dynamic love. But the price is high. Your identity fades, little by little. You stop saying certain things to avoid conflict. You give up on dreams just to keep the relationship alive. And deep down, you feel you no longer know who you are, without that presence that controls you. It is at this point that Nietzsche warns us. When love becomes a prison, it is no longer love. It is the will to power masked as affection. And the most frightening part is that, even when someone manages to escape, many end up returning, as if an invisible force pulled them back, to repeat the same pattern. That force has a name in Nietzsche, the eternal return. Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle? As if, no matter how many partners you changed, the story was always the same pain, the same fights, the same wounds disguised in new faces. Nietzsche called this idea the eternal return, the endless repetition of what you have not yet found the courage to transform. Imagine living every detail of your life, exactly the same, over and over, for all eternity. The same choices, the same mistakes, the same loves ending in ruins. Nietzsche's question is brutal. If you had to relive this relationship infinitely, would you accept it? Or does the very thought already suffocate you? In relationships, the eternal return reveals itself when you confuse intensity with destiny. You meet someone new, but soon you notice the same signs: suffocating jealousy, subtle manipulations, demands disguised as care. It is as if you were trapped in a labyrinth where every door leads to the same place. This pattern is no accident. It is the reflection of your own shadow, of wounds left unhealed that push you to seek in the other what you believe is missing in yourself. Nietzsche saw in this a call to awakening. You only break the cycle when you face head-on what keeps drawing you back to suffering. Until you do, you will keep returning, like a moth drawn to the flame. The eternal return, then, is not just a distant philosophical theory. It is a cruel mirror of your everyday life. Every time you surrender to a relationship you know will hurt, you are saying yes to repetition. Every time you call possession love, you are agreeing to live the same drama again and again. The question is, do you have the courage to break this cycle? To choose differently, even if it means facing loneliness, emptiness, and uncertainty? Because only those who face the abyss are capable of creating a new life. And it is at this crossroads that a symbolic story arises, one that shows how the illusion that to love is to suffer can imprison an entire lifetime. You walk alone down a deserted street at dusk. The cold wind cuts against your skin, but what weighs the most are the memories. Suddenly, a scene flashes in your mind like a film. You, sitting across from someone who once said they loved you, yet whose eyes no longer reflected tenderness. The silence between you was so dense it seemed to fill the entire room. And still you stayed. It was not the first time. In another relationship, you endured humiliations disguised as jokes, broken promises that turned into repeated excuses. Each time, you believed suffering was proof of the love's intensity. Nietzsche would say that, in those moments, you were not truly loving the other. You were trapped in their will to power, and in your own need to affirm yourself through pain. On that imaginary street you walk, there are many doors along the way. You recognize them. Each one leads to a different face, but behind them the story is always the same. Suffocating jealousy, silent manipulation, fear of abandonment. The scene repeats itself as if it were inevitable. The eternal return standing before your eyes. Then something shifts. You stop before one of those doors, and you do not enter. The icy wind still stings your face. The emptiness of solitude surrounds you. But there is also a new sensation: freedom. For the first time, you realize you can choose not to relive the same pain. Not because you stopped believing in love, but because you understood that love does not have to mean suffering. Nietzsche did not romanticize love. For him, to love was to accept chaos, but also to have the courage to transform it into strength. Suffering is not proof of intensity. It is only inevitable when you fail to see the hidden dynamic of the will to power. The story that always repeats itself can only end when you say a definitive no to what imprisons you. And when you close that door, you discover something unsettling. The key was always in your hand. You see now that love can be both creation and destruction. It can be a force that drives your life forward, or a prison that slowly consumes it. Nietzsche warns us that love, when ruled by the will to power, ceases to be an encounter and becomes a battlefield of egos. And in that battlefield, suffering is not accidental. It is the inevitable consequence of confusing possession with affection. How many times have you called love what was only fear of being alone? How many times have you endured the unbearable because you believe that to love is the same as to suffer? Each one of those choices was a yes to the eternal return. But now you see, the key to breaking the cycle was always in your hands. It is not about denying love. It is about facing it without illusions. accepting that it involves pain, but refusing the lie that pain must become a prison. To love, according to Nietzsche, is to live chaos with courage, not to submit to invisible chains. And the question that remains is direct. Will you keep reliving the same stories? Or will you have the courage to create a love that is not a reflection of your shadow, but an expression of your freedom? If this reflection spoke to you, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who also needs to awaken to this truth. Here, you will always find new insights into the dark psychology of human relationships, diving deep into the ideas of the greatest thinkers. And in the next video, we will descend even further into the depths of the mind, exploring how these hidden forces shape our choices without us even noticing. I will see you in the shadows of the next hidden truth.